Embattled Attorney General Jeff Sessions this week appeared before the nation's black law enforcement officials to outline the Trump administration's anti-crime agenda. But Sessions' address at the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives Convention in Atlanta was overshadowed by President Trump's recent controversial remarks to an audience of New York police officers just last week.
And when you see these thugs being thrown into the back of a paddy wagon, you just see them thrown in, rough. I said, please don't be too nice.
Now, White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders later said that the president was just joking. But the heads of several law enforcement agencies rebuffed Mr. Trump's comments. At the Noble Conference, Sessions publicly sidestepped his boss' remarks and offered a different message.
We have your back. We are in this together. We cannot restore and improve public safety in our country if we are not united.
I'm sure our panel and viewers are wondering who is your when he says we have your back. Joining us on Skype from Atlanta is Clarence Cox. Clarence was just sworn in last night as the new president of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Executives. Mr. Cox, on behalf of everyone here at NewsOne Now, congratulations and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you and good morning.
So we know with the public remarks that Attorney General Sessions offered to the organization, but we understand that the closed-door remarks were a bit more contentious. What was the nature of that conversation that you and your leadership had with Attorney General Sessions?
Well, it wasn't much different than what the public comments were. He was very careful not to throw his boss under the bus, obviously. But, you know, we were really concerned because, you know, it wasn't a joke to us, and it's certainly not funny, and we're not laughing. So, you know, it was much to do about nothing in my mind. We had a conversation. It was like meeting a stranger in a coffee shop and just holding a general conversation. We couldn't get him to lock in on anything other than he did commit to not deploying federal resources to misdemeanor marijuana cases. And as he closed, you know, I said, you know, is it something that we can look forward to in the future, or are we going to have open dialogue with the Department of Justice? He assured that, and he also said that he was going to use the Civil Rights Division to make sure that use of force cases are continually investigated.
Interesting use of the Civil Rights Division, given what we know about the affirmative action case that's soon to be coming down. Many black Americans are concerned where that organizations like Noble and other black law enforcement agencies stand on such contentious issues of the day. Did you all make plain to Attorney General Sessions your position on fair and civil treatment of those who may be suspects in criminal charges?
We certainly did. Again, you know, we were outraged at the comments, and you know, for our commander-in-chief to make a comment like that, it was very disturbing. But what was more disturbing for me was my colleagues in the background who decided it was appropriate to laugh or applaud. It wasn't funny, it wasn't professional, and by our very oaths, those things aren't allowed. Earlier this year, Noble, along with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, released a document that clearly outlines use of force policy. So agencies as small as 3 employees to large agencies could use this document to make sure that our folks' rights aren't violated.
Attorney General Sessions and his Department of Justice seem intent on bringing back the war on drugs. Where does Noble stand on that?
Well, we're going to monitor that and be very vocal about that. If you remember in the early 80s, there was a so-called war on drugs, and those drugs pretty much confined into the black neighborhood. Now the war on drugs seems to be very important because we're talking about pharmaceuticals and drugs like that are affecting other communities, not specifically designed to infiltrate the black neighborhood. So, you know, we're looking at this real close too.
We also have seen Attorney General Sessions and President Trump reference an uptick in violent crime, which all of our statistical metrics tell us that that's not necessarily true. Is that accurate from the reading that Noble gets?
It's certainly not accurate. In fact, the chief of Atlanta Police got up shortly after General Sessions made that statement and made it very clear that the crime in Atlanta is down. You know, and you know, going into that, when you talk about places like Chicago and places Baltimore and those kinds of places, this administration seems to want to put a heavy hand on it, and I think it's a lot to do with who our president has surrounded himself with. You know, you bring in generals, guys who've been very successful on the battlefield, and talk about urban crime. I think that's bad for our country, bad for our neighborhoods, and specifically bad for our people. We don't need military leaders advising our president on how to combat crime here in America, and it's certainly on the streets of the communities that we serve. My understanding is some of my colleagues and Noble members in Chicago were not consulted when the administration decided to send in heavy armed agents from the federal government to try to combat the issues in Chicago. So what we offered for our president through Mr. Sessions was an open dialogue. We asked that we be at the table and talk about some of these issues that affect our people, and certainly consult him to provide a better way of handling these issues.
How would Noble advise President Trump to handle some of the issues that black communities face regarding policing?
Well, first, we've got to engage in our communities. By making a statement like he did the other day, it harms our officers, black and white, because now we put guys on the defense. And when you openly call suspects thugs, I think that's a real bad thing, because, first of all, we're not charged with distributing punishment to the folks that we arrest or detain. We're charged with detaining them, bringing them to justice, and let the court systems work the way they're designed. So, you know, we look at engagement. We're working very feverishly across this country in communities trying to provide services, because if somebody calls 911, they expect something to happen. And a lot of times those issues don't necessarily call for police matters, so there's not a need for a heavy hand. But if you deteriorate the community engagement that we're so feverishly trying to provide, that's an issue. We teach young men and women across this country how to engage with police officers, because sometimes people don't know. I grew up, for instance, in a yes ma'am, no ma'am era. The young men and women of today, that's history. They don't yes ma'am and no ma'am, and they always want why.
Leslie, given everything that you've said thus far, is there anything the Trump agenda's law enforcement policy offers that Noble is supportive of or can stand behind?
As of this time, no. We don't have any specifics that we feel comfortable agreeing with, and that's why we feel that we need to get to the table, have an open discussion, and talk about how we can move forward. And if he's so committed to making America great again, he has to talk to all of America, and that includes African Americans.
Clarence Cox, the new president, congratulations of Noble. We thank you so much for your time and joining us here on NewsOne Now this morning.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You do the same. Let's go back to our panel real quick. Kim, let's start with you, because as the GOP person, you heard Clarence Cox say the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives don't hear anything that they can support on Trump's legislative agenda regarding law enforcement. How does that make you feel?
Okay, I wanted to first point out that the joke that Trump made, there's no excuse for that. That was tasteless. And I'm glad that Sessions went to the black police executives and tried to turn that message around and saying, look, we have your back and we are on your side. And I think from what I read, he was well received and he did listen to their concerns. And I think that is a forward move to the right direction.
Is there anything, though, does that give you pause, knowing that the black law enforcement executives don't agree with your party's president and his legislative agenda for policing?
I think there's many people that, can agree to disagree on many different situations. But as, Sessions, as our Attorney General, as long as he has their back, I feel very comfortable about that.
Robert, Sessions says, I have your back, and all the applause was, at the least what we've read, professional, to say the least.
Well, Jeff Sessions is a racist little leprechaun. And I think we all know that, and we all understand that, and we all believe that to be true within the rubric of Jeff Sessions' entire 30-year career in the public light. What we have to understand is that when the president was making this comment, he was making it specifically with regard to the MS-13 gang, which in that area where the speech is taking place, it killed between 16 and 18 people in the last year. That was the context around what he was saying. What I think Jeff Sessions needs to do is stop defunding the Civil Rights Division, stop defunding investigations into police brutality, assign actual assistant attorney generals to combat instances of excessive force and understand how to work with the community as opposed to antagonizing and demonizing people within the African American community.
Right, right. Well, the Justice Department under Jeff Sessions has a lot left to be desired.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.